more join us, all the better. All right. Are we good to go?
Yep, we're all set.
Thank you. Okay, so good evening, everyone. I am Paul Goldstein. I am the co-chair of the Waterfront Parks and Cultural Committee of Community Board 1. You're here for our March committee meeting. Welcome. Just very quickly, let me introduce the co-chair. Andrew Zelter is here with us, and Diana Suitai, our Director of Land Use and Planning, is here as well. So with that, we have, we've actually almost started already, but let's start formally. So the first person who we're going to have a chat with regarding the future of Pier A is Wari Price, who's been a regular. She has one of the best attendance records on this committee at this stage. No, thank you.
It's always my pleasure to be with you.
Well, we're happy to have you, and thank you for coming back. So we did talk a little bit about Pier A last time you were here, but I think we know that that discussion has to continue, and we have to hear from more people. And I don't know that the members of the committee really had an opportunity to state what their interests are as far as Pier A goes. Okay. So, Wari, could you, when you discuss it, give just a short history of how it's evolved over the years, you know, when it was opened and closed, who ran it, EDC was in charge for a while, and it's now Battery Park City, but I'll let you do it because I think you know it better than I do.
Thank you, Paul. Well, thank you, members of the Waterfront Parks and Cultural Committee. It is a pleasure to be here. I do have the history since when we began, and I had a small desk at the Parks Department. The current Parks Commissioner, Henry Stern, said, "Oh, here you are," and you know, he knew he didn't have to pay me any salary, that I was creating a nonprofit to be their partner. He said, "Well, you'll be the Heritage Area Harbor Park Director." And the previous person had left, and I think Commissioner Stern knew that instead of paying someone, he would just give me a title because the Battery was a member of Harbor Park. And it's a coincidence, Cole and I see that she's joined us tonight. She was my predecessor as the Heritage Area Director of Harbor Park. And for those of you that are not acquainted, the state, it was a state law that created heritage areas where groups of historic sites came together in a common goal and became a heritage area. Today, there are 19 heritage areas throughout New York State. And when the EPF grants are issued, if you're a member of a heritage area, you have some extra points. So as the Heritage Area Director for Harbor Park, when the ship at South Street Seaport, I want to be sure I pronounce it, the Waiver Tree.
That's right.
When it was getting grants, I would write a letter of recommendation as the Harbor Park Heritage Director. Snug Harbor's a member. The Empire State Stores over in Brooklyn. Now we've been, of course, Statue, Ellis, Battery are all part. Seaport, and then it has gone up to Queens, North Gang Creek Plaza there, which also has a maritime history. So it's immigration, maritime history is our overlay. And of course, we've seen the Empire State Stores turn into, as Brooklyn Bridge Park has. I mean, there's been incredible expansion of the various sites as the neighborhoods have embraced them. And I think they've been core to the development of these neighborhoods. So at one point, a visitor center was going to be housed at Pier A when Pier A had left the fire department and then was at Parks. And so we received a $4 million EPF grant to situate this in, that's how the building was going to function as this educational, interpretive, heritage area visitor center. And they had, a couple of developers that didn't work out. And then and I have a calendar of all these dates in the presentation, it went from Parks Department to New York City Economic Development. And then at that point, it left a sense of interpretation, education, heritage as a focus, and then was going to become revenue producing for the city of New York. And then, as we know, then whether, renovations and then all of the other ramifications, they then made an agreement with Battery Park City Authority to have a 99-year lease, and they would be controlling the future of Pier A and how it was being used. So we have, I believe, the Battery has suffered an incredible burden with the screening, the security screening, which was required after 9/11 and for visitors that are going to go to Statue and Ellis Island. So these incredibly intrusive and overscale for a historic, beautiful waterfront were erected in front of Castle Clinton. And we start, Diane, we can show that today because that's a good intro to the presentation to give you a site understanding to, what is this screening that is happening and has been there since the statue reopened after 9/11. So, Diana, can you move the presentation, please? Or begin it. There's Pier A. Okay, so there you see I hope, can you see it without my picture on this screen, or how do I do it so we just see the picture? I mean, Paul, do you see just the image of the waterfront, or do you see me covering the tent? I see my picture.
No, we're just seeing a beautiful picture of the park.
Perfect, that's what I want. Okay, so you see the massiveness of the screening facility and then a holding tent. We'll go to the next one. And that's exactly what it's for. There's the same sorts of signage you see at any airport. Next, please. And then now you'll see the massive of the tent and the Pier A building. When we heard that the restaurant no longer was going to function there, I called Battery Park City right away, the authority, and made my pitch. I said, goodness, it's my understanding it's been a revenue challenge for many years. Maybe the pandemic really put them over, but if there is the ability to rethink its use, I would like to revisit. It was talked about many years ago, and the National Park Service was on, trying to move in there. But the revenue that was discussed was way beyond what they were able to afford to pay. So they weren't able to move in, because all people that are involved in public space and enhancement for visitation of people know this is really an abomination. It is incredibly disrespectful to the castle, its rich history, the integrity of the 1,500-foot beautiful promenade that has been loved and cherished since the Native Americans fished from the banks, not that promenade, but the sense of the land meeting the sea. It's for hundreds of years. So that would be the sense that screening would happen on the ground floor. Now we'll go to the next slide. And it's, as we all know, a glorious building. It's been beautifully restored. Go to the next one. And screening would be on the base floor. It's got a tremendous history. And then look adjacent to the great history that the castle had. But, the idea that uh, the sense of its history and the activity that was all here at the tip of Manhattan. I think we want to see that we continue to move towards energizing and making our neighborhood, which is now much more residential than during this period. Let's go to the next one. Okay, and that's one of its last written times, and with the clock, which is a World War I memorial. Next. Continue the next one. These are just historic photographs. And then this gives you that history where today the Harbor House restaurant has closed. It opened in 2014. EDC became the lead agency in 2008. In 1992, we received the $4 million grant when New York City Parks works to establish the Harbor Park Visitor Center at Pier A. It was the fire department from 1960 to 92, 1886 to 1950, the harbor patrol. So, this is its lifespan. And then in 1975, it was listed on the National Register. So you truly have great history, a great sense of how it has served. It's time for it to again have a position of service to the city. So we go to the next. And I start this since it's extreme downtown is the Battery, washed by waves, cool by breezes. Look at the crowd of water gazers there. And Melville lived downtown. I think this beginning of Moby Dick, I think it's the same today. With the pandemic, more of downtown has discovered the Battery, its gardens, its beauty, and it really has captured a period that we've never had before. So part of me is so thrilled because so much we've worked to do is now being recognized by people as they stroll or need a walk or bring their children, or, Tammy talked about having picnics on the Oval. So I think in some great ways, the park and now with Playscape, getting ready to open in June, we're really ready to say to everyone downtown, we've worked for 27 years to give you this asset. It's time to enjoy it to its fullest. So we go to the next. And the sense that these are other things that I think are very important that the site from Pier A and the upper floors can certainly celebrate. I think the 720-mile Empire State Trail, which has its beginnings along the border in Battery Park City and goes, it goes west, it goes north. It really is a way to talk about the richness, the excitement, the beauty of our state. And then combining that program with the 19 heritage areas, starting with the Harbor Park and its interpretation. And that's the next one, Diana, is it lists all of the 19 heritage areas throughout New York State. They're not any two better programs to celebrate for us as New Yorkers, our city and our heritage sites throughout the entire state of New York. And being able to talk about this, introduce these various sites in the vines of this historic structure, we already spent a lot of time on exhibitry when we were going to move in there. But the developer that Parks had partnered with was not able to pull it off, unfortunately. But we've gone through how the upper floors would be used for exhibition, for meeting, for now after the 7,000 students we have coming to the urban farm, we're set to expand our education programs to all the schools that have already discovered the Battery. And then the next one. So then if any of you've been to the Moynihan train hall at the new station, The elongated architectural footprint of Pier A makes it so appropriate for wonderful projections, LED interpretive screens on either side, that as instead of just going through security and being bored and feeling the shuffle and bustle, I believe that the building can come forth with wonderful descriptions. And, I love New York in the best possible ways so that our visitors basically understand all of the other destination sites and the richness of us as recreation, natural resources, and history. So the walls on that base floor will be filled with ways to inspire people to understand what's going on, what are we excited by. We will also use the opportunity to talk about the museums that are very close by. When people get their reservation to go through screening, they'll also be said, yes, and 50 meters from where you'll be with the Museum of Jewish History, the Memorial to the Holocaust. You'll have the Skyscraper Museum. You'll have the Museum of American Indian. So please come and enjoy our neighborhood. Make your trip beyond just getting on. Well, it's great to go on the boat and go to Statue Nellis, but we have so much more. So when you've got a building that excites and engages the public with content, we have got so much content to celebrate. And I do believe that the social studies, the geography, this sense of our history for our school children are also a very important part of what Pier A could be. We've already at capacity at the urban farm with 150 schools and 7,000 students. We also have curriculum being developed for the playscape, so we'll be able to expand there. And that's science and arts, because with the showbox theater, we have the visual and performing arts. So social studies and history would be perfect for and here you could be indoors in inclement weather. So I believe that these nodes of educational outreach for the incredible schools, and when I started the urban farm, we went from the 8 students at Millennium High School to 650 students, no budget, nothing, because I just went and knocked on the door of all the principals downtown. And it was all the downtown schools that came that first season. So they already know that the Battery is a source of experiential education. Experiential learning is finding its day now. And with the pandemic, learning outdoors has even been more of a positive. So we go to the next slide. So this is our feeling about how we would embrace, if this could even, happen. This is our vision for the future of Pier A. Now let's go to the walls and the way the Battery is being affected and designed by the Battery Place AECON description. So you see that we have quite massive walls in the park, and then they're buried in a berm, but there is a real sense of hiding behind. And I want this not to seem obtrusive. I want it to be engaging. When I talked about a single wall that would be vegetal, our walls were going to be filled with plants. But what I'm seeing and what's being presented is massive, flat, kind of institutional barriers. So I'm putting a hope that it's still walls. We know we need it for resilience, but with the celebration of heritage and the map, let's say, of Empire State Trails. Let's go to the next ones. These are just this is what they're proposing. And keep going, the next one, Diana. And they're kind of blank and likely very institutionalized. Next. And we're saying, what about if it was a map? This is this is the memorial in the Battery for Ambrose, and it's a period piece, but it gives you a sense of interpretation history. It's something to be. What is that? It's a question. It's not a blank, flat this is the Battery, this is Pier A, this is Wagner Park. And I think the idea of reinforcing the trail, you've got the kiosk about, I guess, 100 meters from this area, but to welcome people by celebrating our state's trail in these areas. Then another way to look at Stone, let's go to the next, is a little more lyrical in relief. The waterfront, or what is the theme that will engage people to the richness of recreation and natural resources of our state. And then the next one is vegetal. This is out in Oakland. Now, granted, their climate's different from ours, but it's a sense of bringing plants. And since that's all we do, we know how to plant in troughs, we know how to plant on the ground plane. We plant when we've got the tunnel under us, when we've got the underpass under us and hot air blowing out of jets all over the place. So we've never had an unspoiled, beautiful land with nothing underneath. So something like this is not unrealistic and gives us kind of a celebration. We're parkland. So, but we have a job to protect ourselves from stormwater retention and management, as well as sea level rise. Next. And from what I saw, the last thing that came before the community board were these, and also that I sat in on a parks, was this massive tones of gray block. And I just want to put forth that I think, and I'm not saying the designers have said no to this or Battery Park City said no. I think everyone is now figuring out how we make it softer. I think the elevated planters now, so that these walls don't continue totally across the plane, that they brought the steps up. They're really raising up the entire landscape. But unfortunately, at the Battery, we've got massive walls. So what I'm saying is I think we should be more imaginative, and they should present then what's going to happen when you get into Pier A, so that our plaza, it all has a theme and a meaning. And it's things that aren't going away. The Empire State Trail's not going away. The heritage areas have been here since the 80s. So I think we need to truly celebrate our riches and then communicate them to the visiting public. I know upstate needs tourism. Many towns throughout our great state are wanting visitation. So we could be in kind of an economic engine here at Pier A to really spread our good fortune, because the city, before the pandemic. And also not knowing, I'm not a futurist. I can't tell you that we're going to be back up to 68 million people in 5 years, but I do know we've got 5 years to get it right, to get the wharf built, to get the South Battery built, and to transfer the screening into Pier A during this time, and then to create a wonderful center of education and heritage for the state and our city of New York. And with that, because of our low visitor level now, we're not displacing too many people, and we're not hurting our hospitality economy either. It's not there right now. So I feel that there's a very important moment in pulling all this together, where it's I believe, a win-win for everyone. And of course, I would want the people downtown to look at the building. Remember, it goes quiet after 4:30. So the building, and certainly the upper floors, could be definitely used for community gatherings and for lecture series, for film. It's about our heritage. It's about who we are as a people. And I do believe that there has to be a change from bringing major revenue into the coffers. But I believe if we do it right, revenue will be inspired through the use and the conceptual look of this building, by really talking and publicizing other great destinations in our city and our state. So I think there will be a way of revenue being generated, but not from a food or retail use on site. So that's it, and I'm happy to discuss it and also be open to other ideas.
Okay, thank you, Wari. Very good. It was very good presentation. Had some, I think, some good ideas. Just a quick question that comes to mind. Who do you envision being the operator of this sort of visitor facility?
Well, initially it was going to be the Harbor Park Heritage Area.
Right.
I believe that that is a discussion that will be made with the various stakeholders. The National Park Service, who needs this to be able to access their two great sites in the harbor. And they have resources also to create this uh, uh, screening and interpretive area. Uh, if if it goes back as a heritage area, we would hope that we would be able to bring in resources to how the exhibits would run and how that would work. So it's the idea, and there were funds, many years ago. But I do think that having the right vision, then you organize who's in charge, who is the leasee, who will be able to share in it. And also, I think, these different programs, and maybe it's an I Love New York office there that brings it all in and updates the LEDs all the time. I think we can be very open to a real consortium of people that that understand the goal here and how do we make it a functioning building and welcome people. It's certainly going to be a much more enhanced way than walking through that white plastic tent. The integrity of the structure, I think the LED projections and presentations that people will be able to enjoy is a much more engaging, wow, only in New York type of experience. But who is the leasee? How do we work with the Battery Park City Authority through this? I think all that needs to be worked out with the stakeholders that really will be the ones occupying it, and the base need of security screening to be able to access Statue and Ellis. And I do feel that, and again, I don't know the timing or what boats they'll be using, but I had envisioned that embarkation would happen at Pier A. It would pick up everybody, but disembarking would be at the 5 gangways or the 3 or 4 gangways at the Battery. So you don't have the boats all lined up. And they would be empty. Boats would always be empty once they got to Pier A for the next. I don't know what that does to statue cruises. Would have to work out the timing to be sure that there's not a lag. But the Battery, I think, could be such a beautiful way to come back to the beautiful gardens. They've just had the harbor. Again, what's best for the visitor to love New York? So I think try to keep it as seamless and as well organized time screening periods, the reservations. Everyone's used to getting a reservation to go to a museum today. So I think we're in that sense of being prepared for the day's events. And so you'd embark from probably an outboard, because I don't think the boats can go up to the historic structure, and then make the trips to Ellis and Statue. And when the boats return, visitors would be dispatched onto the wharf at the back to be able to go on sea glass or have something to eat in the gardens or let their children go to this incredible playground they've read about. But I think splitting that up means that nobody is over congested. The Battery has, 1,500 linear feet of waterfront to bring them back.
Okay, before I open it up for committee discussion, I see we have Nick from Battery Park City here, and I know we didn't envision you being, one of the speakers on this, but thank you for being here. And Could you just give us a very quick report on where you are on Pier A? Are you open to, having community input and Battery Park input into what the eventual use and of this pier will be?
Oh, sorry. Good evening. Can you all hear me?
Yes, thank you, Nick.
Okay, of course. Thank you. Thanks for having me. And Rory, thanks for that. I know we had discussed this, but the presentation really is wonderful to see it all in one place. Hold on a second. My daughter's helping my wife cook. So, okay.
Great. Someone with the new playscape.
I know.
My customer, my new customer.
She can't wait to see it. So yeah, I mean, the short answer, Paul, is one of the things that we've obviously tried to do, certainly at the Battery Park City Authority over the last 5 years or so, is, we always err on the side of engagement, right? So we want to try and engage as many folks as we can. And with a project like this, I think, potentially going forward, it would involve all sorts of stakeholder engagement. For the benefit of the committee, I can kind of just give you a quick rundown of kind of where we are, if that's helpful, and seeing some of the lead times, I think, and hearing, I think, some of the considerations we still need to work through. It's anyone who's been involved in government can probably attest. It's probably good that we have some time. PRA is currently subject to a contract with obligations to be resolved among kind of existing parties, right? The contract we have in place runs through 2038 with the existing operator. So that is kind of being worked through as we speak, with the timeline TBD. That's, the lawyers are working through what the particulars are, and I wouldn't want to go too much further afield there because I'd be out of my depth. But it's subject to a current contract now. Any future potential changes to the use of PRA would, as we have discussed here this evening, presumably entail kind of an array of stakeholder input. So we certainly look forward to hearing more about what kind of might be involved as this goes forward. I think what we put together was incredibly helpful. I know actually last night, for the folks who were at the Environmental Protection Committee meeting, this came up a little bit last night as well. I think obviously Allison, Wendy, and I think Diana were there. But there were some other things that came up there. So Tom Burton, who's community board member, but also the captain for Manhattan by Sail, was saying, well, if we have boats presumed at Pier A, can we have the shearwater or other types of tourist boats there and whatnot? So a lot of different things I think would need to kind of go into the calculation. But as a general matter, we're interested to hear more about it. But not at a point yet where we could make decisions about future use. But if and when we do, obviously, we want to make sure that the engagement and the outreach was broad-based and meaningful, for sure.
Okay, thank you. Is that it?
Sure.
So in other words, this is a good time for the community board to think about uses because you obviously are not that far along. Okay, I'll leave it at that unless you want to.
Paul, I would say, Paul, this is Wendy. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I was just going to ask that very question. Is it helpful for the community to weigh in? And I especially think that this building is going to be incredibly difficult to lease out to businesses because it's going to be on the wet side of the wall and it will flood, as we all know. So it's not like it used to be, if that makes sense.
Right. I know the whole issue of, how much private business operations belongs in the pier is something that's going to be up for discussion. I'll just leave it at that. And, I think people who want to say anything about that or anything else regarding the pier and some of the uses that have been discussed, now's the time. Let me see. Do we have any hands up? Alice.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And thanks, Rory. That was a really great presentation. And thanks for coming last night to our EPC. I would just say that, it's a point that we certainly talked about last night, Nick, is, the authorities acknowledgement, if not promise, to make sure that however the resiliency plans for Pier A get resolved, and in fact, from my understanding, they are very close to finalized, or at least they're appearing before the Public Design Commission in next month as a final packet, if I'm understanding correctly, that they definitely take into consideration other possible ways of using this pier. So in other words, what's in front of it is very well thought out. If in fact there is going to be, let's say, a visitor center with ferry boats or whatever it might be, that what's been planned for will allow for that to happen, that it's very flexible in its planning. That was the point that was raised yesterday, and I just want to make sure that everybody is on the same page about that. Thanks.
Yeah, Alice, Paul, if it's all right, I can jump in. That's actually really helpful. Thank you. One thing I also kind of had written down here that I wanted to mention, so thank you for reminding me, Alice. Our Vice President for Real Property, under whose bailiwick our range of resiliency kind of infrastructure initiative falls, Gwen Dawson was there last night as well, and she had echoed that as well. So yes, that's something that we certainly wanted to get across. Our goal with the resiliency projects generally, but with Pier A and Pier A Plaza specifically, would be not to preclude any use of the pier by virtue of some sort of constraint on the design of the plaza. So we wouldn't want that to happen. We'd want to make sure that, to the extent these things could be imagined, there's always, unimaginable things, but we would want to make sure that the design of the plaza wouldn't necessarily preclude the use of the pier in the future for this or anything else if it gets to the point where it becomes something else. We're just not at that point yet.
Thanks, Dick. And just one more question. Am I right that, in fact, you are in the final stages in this part of the 90% done package, or no?
Well, I think we're talking about two different things, right? We're not talking about
Pier A
Pier
Plaza.
Plaza as part of resiliency, yeah, but not as part as any kind of new use, right? So the use of Pier A is not affected by that.
The resiliency redesign of that plaza is pretty much done, right?
Well, what we're going to be back to, actually, I was just talking to Diana today. We think we're going to be back to you hopefully in April at some point with some answers and follow-ups to the last time we came to you, I think on the 22nd of February. And then looking probably toward the end of April, May, we'd be going to PDC with the close to final design.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Thanks very much.
Yeah, we're going to get a date for you soon on when we'll be back, but probably mid-April or so to EPC.
And just to understand, the concept of a visitor center of some sort is certainly within the realm of possibility.
Good.
What do you want to respond to that?
What was that? I'm sorry, I wasn't sure.
Visitor center, maybe it doesn't have to be exactly what Wari was saying, but a visitor center, a ticketing center, is that something that you would consider for the pier?
I mean, I don't want to, without knowing all the things we don't know, right? All the unknowns we don't know, all the unknown unknowns. I don't think that we'd want to rule anything out for the potential futures of Pier A. Just we're not yet to the point where we consider different uses for Pier A because we're under an existing contract, which itself would need to be worked through. And then if there were a discussion about potential future uses, that would then open up an entirely different list of stakeholders, certainly CB1, obviously EDC, City Parks, National Park Service. There's going to be a new mayor next year. There's going to be a new governor in 2 years. I think a whole lot of folks would need to be able to weigh in on that decision. But, immediately what I wanted to make sure I came tonight would be, because from my own perspective, I was like, well, is what we're doing now going to necessarily preclude that? And I'm glad Gwen was able to kind of reiterate that last night, that none of the designs that we're contemplating for Pier A would, by virtue of their design, kind of preclude future potential different uses. That's unfortunately as much as I have because we don't too far out in the future otherwise.
It's fine.
Sorry, I hope that's helpful.
Could I just, I'll call on you next, Tom, but Tammy had her hand up next.
So, hey, Paul, thanks. Wari, welcome. It's so nice to see you. And Nick, thank you for coming. Nick, did you hear Wari's concerns and comments specifically about the design plans as they go through the Battery in terms of the feeling of the stone walls and the berms versus what they're looking for that goes seemingly met, with what they're going for the park versus what the Battery Park City Authority has proposed for stone and treatment?
We discussed, I think, in February as well, and we'll be discussing that feedback with obviously the City Parks Department, which, as we know, it's their land. So we've got that feedback, and we would hope to be back to you, the EPC committee, I think, next month with updates on that.
So I just have a direct question on that then, because we asked City Parks when we were at that meeting at the Museum of Jewish Heritage, so long ago, when we were all allowed to be in a room in person.
In the before
And
times,
New York City
January
Parks
2020, I remember.
Yeah. And New York City Parks Department specifically pushed it back and said all of those choices and decisions are at the behest of the Battery Park City Authority. So I'm asking officially, because this is not the second, but I believe the third time I've heard the same dialogue, as to what do we need as a community board to be able to do to support the Battery Conservancy. It's not a major request, it's actually a very contextual asking. What do we need to do to help support that ask to get it done for them? What would the obstacle be when the Parks Department told us very specifically over a year ago that those decisions were all done by the Battery Park City Authority?
So, yes, I mean, there were design decisions made by us, but within the, I hate to go back and forth, but design decisions made by us, but within the parameters set by the Parks Department, because it's a New York City park. So, again, we'll continue the conversations with the Parks Department. I would hope that they would be there, or we can have a representative there when we're there next month with you to work through this. But given the parameters that we have as set by City Parks, and Rory knows this, we were going to work with it within those parameters and kind of strictures that are set with us to try to come to the outcome that is most desirable.
So you can understand our concerns is that,
of course,
we've said something before, the Battery Conservancy has said something, we've been told by Parks it's to your, so I'm not, and now if it's a conversation that's had again in April, but then you're going to PDC in April and May, then it really doesn't, timing wise, work for city government in terms of community board government process. So it's a concern, which is why I'm saying it in those very direct ways on how the community board can advocate, because we've come out before on this and haven't seen any change.
Okay.
So, just let us know what we can do to be helpful in the dialogue here to support the conversation.
I will. Thank you.
All right.
I'll go back and I'll let you know if there's anything different or new in terms of that, but for sure.
Perfect.
Thank
and
you.
then I'm just going to remind both, you're welcome, and thank you. And I just want to remind both Wari and everyone on the Parks Department, Waterfront Parks Committee, and Nick knows this quite well because it was excruciating with all the dialogues that we've had about Pier A. The greatest ask that we had from the community was outdoor seating around the pier that was accessible to the public at all times. And that is something that was long fought and won and monitored, and the community was very forthright, and probably Nick got more calls than anybody on that kind of stuff. And I do want to raise that as a red flag, because once you turn that building into a security center, it impedes access, and that cuts off the public accessibility to what has been promised to the public. And that is a conversation that needs to be thought of and had, and as well as the building, Wari, is landmark, and the operators had enough troubles getting signage approved because it's a landmark building. So I love the thoughts of neon and signage and stuff. I don't know if, within the confines of what a landmark building is, whether those things are possible, but it certainly is fun to entertain the concepts and ideas, but know that the community would be losing public access to the pier. That is now part of a public pier. So that's just a comment to keep in mind for discussions.
Hey,
Thanks,
Tammy,
guys.
that's really helpful. One of the things, just I think it came up last night, I'm not sure you were on, the call, but Jeff Galloway had mentioned actually that the community board, I think in the past, had been on record saying they didn't want the PRA used as a ferry terminal. So I'm not saying that means anything necessarily.
We
I'm
are.
just saying in terms
We
of
are.
like historical and understanding of the context of where we are, where we're going, it may be helpful to have that at some point. So yes, because I'd be interested in seeing it too.
I just would like to respond to Tammy. I think that it is true that only the ground floor where the screening facility is located is the part that has to be kept, for screening, just like at an airport. But that does not negate public access to the other two floors, nor to any of the plaza outside. What we hope is that the community would welcome being able to have, an acre more of public space along the water's edge with the tent being removed. So the idea of, to keep the idea of people being able to still come to the tip of Manhattan to access these harbor icons, is that part of the ground floor would be used for screening. But the outside or wherever the public tables and chairs that were guaranteed in the farmer agreement, I don't understand why that couldn't be continued for the public use of the plaza. The plaza is public space, just the way all the area around those hideous white tents is public space. It's just we are incredibly compromised by the scale of this incredibly, overbuilt building on the property. Really, I find amazing public space that's been compromised since.
Yeah. I hear you, Wari. I'm just pointing out the space that we're talking about that was argued for Pier A is the surrounding ground floor areas that go all the way out to the edge of the pier that has walk around and public access. And from what we already know from the security center, from the tent area, and how they queue with the Jersey barricades and things like that, it is very limiting to public access as a whole. So, it could very well completely isolate the entire first floor and all of the pier that surrounds it. So you would not have people who were able to sit on either the south or the west side of the pier as they currently are. It could very well potentially cut off the memorial accesses and things.
I'm not sure we can say that without the security people showing a map of exactly how they would install their facility there and how it would be run, and how much of the outlying areas around the building could still be open and public. The security is that they must be in a place where no one can touch them until they get on a secure boat.
Okay.
I know, and that's why I said that it behooves a much longer discussion and much more information than the community currently has.
I agree, because we
That's all.
haven't been in any way to work out a plan because we're not there yet.
All right, let's keep going and hear from a few others if that's okay with you guys. Tom, go ahead.
Hi there. Two points I'd like to make. One is that as Jeff spoke about and was reiterated just now, that the pier, when it was originally RFP'd, or that its historic nature was called out as a specific part of the responsiveness, and we were engaged as a use. My boats were engaged as a use with the winning applicant. That never has materialized as a use on the pier, and it doesn't have to be my boat, but it's certainly the historic uses. And there were fireboats there, as we all know, for many years, and we have historic fireboats. And so there's I think a lot of activation that could be called upon if the proper mooring apparatus were given, and if the pier was ready and able to receive the boats. So that should be, I hope that'll be something that is considered and discussed in any future plans. Secondly, I would hope that maybe as we look to the future, we could look at staging of uses by maybe in 10-year swaths or increments as the water level rises, and that we can look at it as an evolution over time and not just built for 2050 or something like that. And then the last point I'd like to make is that the U.S. Coast Guard Rec Center is federal government property. The concession is a federal park that, access point to a federal park. Now, I'm not sure if, there can be some discussion of the revenue loss that the city would, lose if it goes away from a city park. And maybe, I don't know if that is part of the reason why it's being held within, but if there was a chance to use that rec center, which is very underutilized and is probably a cost to the Coast Guard that it doesn't need, that maybe there's something can be worked out there. And that would be, I would imagine, a lot easier to secure since it's already secure. They have a pier sitting there as well. And it's next to the Staten Island Ferry. Again, something that needs a fair amount of security and oversight and vigilance. So if that could be entertained as a possibility, or at least tell us why not, I'd appreciate that.
All right, we'd have to find out. I know I've heard from other people about that site. Andrew mentioned that as well. But let's keep going.
Sure.
Thank you, Tom. David Shelton has his hand up. You're next.
I'd just like to second Mr. Burton's point that the pier would be a very appropriate place for active maritime use and or historic maritime. Usable waterfront is something that's becoming remarkably scarce for the Battery. So it's heartening to see it being designed in here. I would point out, however, that ferry service, depending on what you're going to be using the pier for, requires that horn to get sounded every time the boat leaves. And people have been complaining about that at other ferry stops, so it's something you're going to bear in mind. Thank you.
Yeah, Battery Park City may not like those horns constantly. Are you talking about docking boats around on the pier?
I think that's what had been mentioned, no? Or nearby.
Just trying to.
Yes, both. I would say that an examination and a charrette where people who know how to run boats could come forward and be invited to discuss the most flexible options, where perhaps some permanent berthing could occur, as well as PUDOs, pickups and drop-offs.
Yeah. I'm not sure what the current infrastructure of that pier is, to be honest. It may not be all that appropriate, but it'd be good to know.
I understand that it's somewhat challenged right now, and the question of how formidable the pier was built for lateral loads is something we should try to understand, I think.
Who could tell us?
Tom, do you know, is the Coast Guard still in charge? Well, no, we're not talking Coast Guard. So I guess, I don't know. Nick, do you know the answer to that? If that's even an option?
I'm sorry, Paul, what was the exact question? I want to make sure. Do what I know?
Or I know?
We're talking about where the boats can be docked, different types of boats at Pier 8.
I wouldn't have that right now. Far beyond my depth of knowledge. I'm learning more and more by the day than I ever thought I would about docking. But no, I don't have that yet. In terms of the types of boats, though, I don't. Yeah, Wari may know, or the folks at the ferry, and whether or not that's compatible with what Pier 8 could or potentially would be able to handle. I think obviously additional studies would need to be done structurally and otherwise.
They had initial talks with the authority many years ago to do just this, and I think it was an outlying barge, not as grand as the one that was erected there after 9/11. Remember that one? Those of us that were here then?
Right, vaguely, yeah.
Yes.
they are outlined and give the ability of boats to come and go. I think Tom is talking about a totally other site, which is on the other side of the promenade, which is the Coast Guard site. And for over a year, the Park Service with the Coast Guard discussed using their facility, but it stopped because of the Coast Guard's need of didn't want anyone on their site, basically, even if they'd gone through security. So it became, and they really tried, but it was totally unsuccessful. I was not involved in their negotiations. I'm just hearing it secondhand from them. But I think the community board also was aware of that as an alternative. But you know, it's the Coast Guard refuses to think of anything but keeping that site. And I think, you know, when I've talked to the various commandants, they're still upset they lost Governor's Island. So they're, you know, that they're never leaving that site. And let's remember that that site has been in federal hands since the 1800s. So it's never really in current history been in city hands. So it was the barge, and it was an immigration station when Ellis Island first burned. They brought the immigrants back to the waterfront of the Battery. So it has a great history. Unfortunately, the building is really quite banal, and it is certainly another blight on our landscape, you know, where, you know, we've got the beauty and the history of a Pier A building. But whatever, I do know that that was tried, and they could never come to any sort of practical agreement of how they would share that space.
Well, then if I could ask, you were speaking, Rory, of embarkation for the Parks Islands in the harbor. Where would that embarkation take place?
So we were talking about leaving from Pier A, but returning at the Battery waterfront, just at the slips that they're creating. The slips that are there now are the new slips of the wharf. So that you would split it up so you don't have a concentration of boat traffic in one place. I think Pier A is very small to have comings and goings of the scale of boat that is now being used. So depending on, and also, you know, they're spending $160 million is the number they talked about last night to be sure that the Battery Wharf is usable for boats. And I'm sure that's Tom's boats. That's a lot of recreation boats. I mean, they have, you know, we have 6 gangways now. They're bringing them down to 5, but they're double because they're showing this alternative use depending on sea level rise. So we will have plenty of use for boating downtown or at the tip. And then I just thought it would be more, again, how does the visitor feel? You know, we talk about all these different things, and I'm fine that, you know, we try to give everybody a great experience at all of our historic structures and this park. And the idea I thought is if you went and got embarked there, you would come back when they stack up all those boats at the end of the day, that would all be at the Battery. And that Pier A basically would continue. I mean, in a sense, the screening would stop with the last boat. It's the 4:30 boat, 5:30 boat, whatever the last boat is. And then the ability then for people to come back, at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, certainly in summertime, where they lengthen the hours at the statue and Ellis to accommodate visitors. So, you know, that was, again, that has to be the people that are using its decision. I'm just putting it out there because I think it would be less congestion.
Okay, thank you. I see a couple of members who spoke already have their hands up. Did you want to speak again, Tammy, Alice?
I was answering a question I think that had already maybe got an answer, but just to say that Community Board 1, as has been noted, has been on record about Pier A, and I just pulled up one from 2007, which very specifically supports the Battery Park City Authority's interest in, and I'm quoting, a home for the National Park Service, Liberty, Ellis Island Ferry. and a dock space for commercial ferry service. So clearly that's been something that's been considered for a long time and is, documented as such. I guess I had one question, and I'm not sure who could answer it. Maybe Tom. How does, if Pier A were to become a site where ferries are embarking or disembarking, what happens in terms of flooding? This is not going anywhere. I understand that this is supposedly allowed to be flooded, and there's no further resiliency measures being done here. So how does that work? Can a boat in 10 years pull up there and actively work if there's no raising of Pier A? I mean, sorry if this is a dumb question, but I don't quite get how where the whole wharf is has to be raised, but yet this spot, which you are advocating for boats to come in on, isn't. How does that work?
Well, I can tell you what happened at Pier 17 during Sandy, or and then the flooding. Nothing. The pier was fine and perfectly serviceable within about a week. And so piers are meant they can usually get wet and then be fully serviceable again. You'd have to look at electric service and other and water lines and things like that, but with some preparation, a pier can be pretty resilient, being a pier.
And if it's underwater?
Well, if the water level is above the pier height, then it's no longer a pier; it's a submerged.
Right. Well, there lies my question in terms of this whole future orientation towards response to climate change. But anyway, that is clearly not the topic for tonight. Sorry, Paul, but I was kind of curious about that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Let's see where we are. I think we've covered all the committee members who are looking to speak on this. We have two people in the public who wanted to weigh in. Robert Guerrero.
Hey, everybody. Thanks a lot for having me. I'm interested, a special interest in Pier A, because I was planning to have a wedding at Pier A. It was originally going to be last year, but obviously because of COVID, it got postponed several times. And it's currently actually scheduled for this August at Pier A. So that's why I was interested in finding out the future of Pier A. I heard about the plans you guys discussed. I'll comment on that first, and then I had a question. I think, I guess I'll be the one person who will say I like the idea of actually having a restaurant in that first floor. There aren't many restaurants in the area, and it was nice to be near the water and have enjoy a meal and the drinks with friends in that area. A beautiful space. But if it were to turn into some other usage, I think the second and third floor could still be used for events that public could do, such as weddings. So that's just my own special interest in that area. But my question is there any plan for this leaseholder, the current leaseholder, to reopen this space this year? And I guess the second question, is it realistic to think that there would actually be a wedding there this year? Thank you.
I guess that's for you, Nick. You have anything?
Yes. Hi, Robert. Welcome. Let me take the second part first, which is to say, well, first off, congratulations. And yeah, look, I, like the rest of you, are hoping each day that we're closer to the end of this than we are to the beginning. So with any hope, if we continue to get shots in arms and the appropriate level of folks vaccinated, I would hope that we can open things up. That's going to be at the direction of the state and the city health experts, and when we can open the things back up to capacity or near full capacity. I think I saw something recently that in certain areas you can have weddings up to maybe 150 or so. I might have seen that on the news the other day. I don't want to be quoted on that. I have to check. But if we're looking at August, and I hope so. Either way, did you submit a permit application for it, or, well, either way?
Well, I actually have a contract with the with the caterers that were doing events in that space.
All right, I'll tell you what, Diana, or if you don't mind, if you have Robert's contact and mine, if you can connect us, Robert, we can take this offline, and I can make sure that
That'd be great.
contracts aside from your folks, I want to make sure that to the extent that the planning can proceed, that we get you in touch with our permit folks as well, because if it's happening there, we want to make sure we had a permit issued if and when appropriate based on whatever the health guidelines are. So yeah, let's connect offline for sure.
Yeah, I'll connect with you, Nick.
Thank you so much. And then the first part of the question was, it's again we're working through it with the various parties, the existing contracts, so it's to be determined what the immediate future for Pier A will be, but we will continue working through that and certainly make sure we're keeping the community board and other interested folks apprised as kind of what the status of Pier A is and when.
Thanks, Nick.
Okay, thank you. I look forward to connecting with you. We'll speak soon.
Oh, I think I was muted. Mary Habstrit is our next speaker, and perhaps you could just quickly tell us who you are.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am with the Museum Ship Lilac at Pier 25 in Hudson River Park. So I wanted to add a few comments about the possibility of ships coming to Pier A. There are several historic New York fireboats about, including the Governor Alfred E. Smith, which is currently at Pier 25. They are destined to go to be a concession at Fulton Ferry Landing in Brooklyn. But it's an example of a way to bring a food concession to a pier. And it would be historically appropriate to have a fireboat there. And I'm not being paid to endorse them in any way. I'm just bringing it up as an example. And as far as ferries are concerned, a number of ferries, the water taxis in particular, are designed to load passengers through the front of the boat, and they actually need a different kind of dock. They can't go into a standard pier. So I think we have to be careful about the discussion of ferries and probably need someone from one of the ferry operators to be involved if you really want to look at that. And related to what Alice brought up about flooding, Lilac was at Pier 25 during Hurricane Sandy. The water came up to the top of the railing on the pier. Ships float. We were tied to the pier and we had no problems whatsoever. We just tilted a little bit towards the pier because we had our lines on very tightly. Ships are made to exist in the water, and so it's really less of a concern for us than it is for people who have to live on the land and deal with the flooding there. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, so I think that wraps up our speakers. We weren't really planning to do any kind of resolution on this. Does anybody want to continue this, or should we perhaps schedule it for additional discussion at next month's meeting to just let committee members bounce it around? What do you think? Does that sound reasonable?
I think so, Paul. I think that's a reasonable suggestion.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it would be great to maybe develop a set of community generated uses that we'd like to see as the discussion had sort of taken that turn.
Yes, I mean, as Alice said, we have a resolution. It's old, but we should look at that and we should take into account what was discussed here and see if we want to revise this. Okay, so with that, I will end this item. Thank Wari for being here. And thank you, Battery Park City, Nick. We appreciate you being involved in this. And I guess if we do put it back on the agenda, we'll let you both know. Okay?
Very much, Paul. Appreciate it.
Thank you both.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks, everyone. We'll speak soon.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Yes. Let's keep going. Item number 2 is good news. We have 2 new parks to celebrate that just opened here in Lower Manhattan, just in time for spring. Those are the Peckslip Park, located, as you would imagine, on Peckslip in the Seaport, right adjacent to the school over there. And we also have the Elizabeth Burger Plaza. And for those people who don't know, Elizabeth not only ran the Downtown Alliance for a number of years, but she was also a long-serving, very good member of this community board and a resident. She raised her children here. So what we're seeing here are some images of each of them. On the left side, you're seeing Elizabeth Burger, and on, well, what was on the right side was the Peckslip. Now, I could offer just a little bit of feedback. Again, I'm most familiar with Peckslip. I've seen a lot of people really using it, and different age groups. I see kids playing there. I see parents, especially after school, with their kids there. I see dog walkers, etc. However, we've also seen that some issues have emerged due to the design of the park. And what I'm getting at is that those planted areas, now you could see people sitting. Hold on, don't move so quickly. Leave that one up for a minute. You could see parents with their kids sitting on the left side, and they're basically sitting in an area that looks like it should be a planted area. Now, that's not entirely clear from the images, but I'm assuming it's supposed to be some kind of vegetation going in there. And you could also see that there is no little fencing or anything else to prevent people from going in there. I know there is another image that shows people walking their dogs in there, and I've seen that as well. And I know a very active member of the community has sent us some images. He, in fact, sent us some of these images that show people using the parks. And one thing that struck me was that if you compare the designs, there are low fences around some of the planted areas at Elizabeth Burger, whereas they do not exist here at this Peckslip. So let me just see. I know we have a couple of reps from parks here, Therese and Ricardo. Are you prepared to discuss that issue for a starter, and then we'll keep going, or do you have anything else to report on these parks? Thank you for being here, and please introduce yourself and tell us, what your job titles are.
Sure. So I'm Therese Flores. I'm the regional manager, and I take care of a lot of parks and community board 1, 2, 4, and 5. And I've invited Ricardo Henko, and he can best describe a lot of the design aspects here. I run a lot of our maintenance part of the park now that we've taken it over, and I can help going forward with whatever we can't cover through what Capital's doing already. So I'm going to let Ricardo take the stage today, and then I'll take any questions afterwards.
Thank you.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Ricardo Henko. I'm a landscape architect at Parks. I am currently the Deputy Director of Landscape Architecture on the Manhattan team at Parks Capital. And I've been at Parks for nearly 27 years. And I can talk about Peckslip particularly, but not Elizabeth Burger at this time. But let me tell you a little bit about the evolution of fencing planted areas at Parks over the time I've been there. I think we used to use even 3 or 4 foot high fencing around plant beds. We started to move down to 2.5-foot fencing, and then 1 foot, like 1.5-foot fencing and 1 foot railing over the years. I think as we've been going, we've been evolving to lesser and lesser fencing. We were, I think between the design of the two projects, Elizabeth Berger and Peck Slip, we've decided, well, if a plant bed is not in the line of traffic, you know, if it's not a desire for people to cross a plant bed, we may be able to be safe without putting a fence there. I've been a little dubious of that, and I think this is a good example of why maybe that is not the best standard. But I think part of the problem with the Peck Slip planting is the beds are to provide shade trees, and then a second layer of herbaceous, grasses, perennials, ground covers that are generally low. And the thing with herbaceous, especially perennials and grasses, is that they're dormant 6 months out of the year. And so they don't really start to, maybe not quite 6 months in New York, maybe 4 to 5 months, but they don't really start to appear until early April, later into April. So and once they appear, they're fairly robust and they get pretty thick. So the planting should be thick enough when it appears that it would be clear to users not to be walking the dogs through it or to be sitting on it. I think when we opened the park just a couple of weeks ago, one of the things that we flagged, and it was Teresa's team and Brad Romaker from Parks M&O, they actually asked, do you think we should protect these exposed edges with range fence until the plants come in? And we said, that might be a good idea. So that was something that we have been planning to do. I think the users got to it more quickly than we were able to get that range fence in. We're hoping that once we get the range fence in, we might have to go back to the contractor and replace some of those plantings that were trampled. And then the spring, blossoming occurs. We'll have a thicker planting in those areas, and it'll be more obvious, be more robust and more obvious to users not to walk through them. We might even see what happens and keep the range fence in longer. But I think over the years, maybe the decision not to put fencing in could have been reconsidered. In addition, there's the stepped granite block seat structure at the end next to South Street. And I think one of the things we've had happen was we have some exposed armrests, and a child caught themselves in it and fell. So we're going to remove the exposed armrests on that seat structure, so there's no more concerns about that. Those are the two things that we're planning to do at this time. And I'll entertain questions if you have any.
Okay, so you're going to do these things, I assume, fairly soon?
Yes.
Great. Okay, thank you for that. So with that, let me open it up for additional members who want to comment. Tom. You're muted. Tom, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Okay. I'm a Peck Slip parent, and I'm also on the community board. Thank you for what's the railings. My friend, that was my friend's daughter who went to the hospital. She caught her foot on one of the armrests and then landed on the next one. And they're also pointed. So does that mean you're going to remove them from all of them?
No, we would not be removing the armrests from the benches that are backing the plant beds. Those armrests, if you look at the pictures, well, I'm not sure these pictures show it as well. The armrests come very close to the backrest of the benches, and there's really not an opportunity to get caught in them. They're not as much a walking, it's not as much of a play surface when it's a bench backing the plant beds. But this particular structure, it's tiered. It has 2 layers of granite block. You can see in this picture here, it has a bottom length of these big granite block slabs, and then there's a second tier. I think the second tier is creating a situation where kids like to play. So it would be these exposed armrests on the ends that you see. These three armrests would all be removed, and the armrests on the other side that are exposed would also be removed.
Okay. All right. I would ask you to entertain maybe removing all of the armrests everywhere.
We will do that. Wait, are you talking about all the armrests on all the benches, or just on this play structure?
I'm talking about all of them. They're also pointy, and a child skateboarding or riding a bike and falling at that at something that's angled at you. You know, it's if it were more curved and rounded or something, but it's presenting quite a sharp point. And I would ask you to think about that and perhaps entertain removing all of them or rethinking that element.
Okay. The problem is that the armrests serve an important function for I would say ADA accessibility and use of the benches. People who are maybe a little older and infirm need the armrests to get up and down in those benches. And so that's why we believe they're important to keep a certain number of armrests. So
I understand. So maybe the World's Fair, sort of like, the old school rounded, the park bench that we see everywhere might be tried and true and a lot safer.
We say these things in our design reviews whenever we review a custom item. This is a custom item that we don't normally use at parks, that we should stick with our standards. But I think, unfortunately, with this park, we did make the decision to go with something that was a little more modern. We do have actually one of our what we call it, the 64 World's Fair bench also has armrests that are of a similar shape. So we thought we were okay using these armrests. I can see where they're a little bit pointy. They're not too pointy. They're a tiny bit rounded at the ends. But we would agree to taking the armrests out, at least at the very least, on that tiered structure near South Street. I think that would be something we would entertain, because this is more something that we can see kids playing on. The other benches, since they're not tiered, it's less of a play concern, or less of a play attraction, I think.
Okay, thank you. Andrew, you have something, your hand up, go.
Paul, just a quick question. So I think you were largely responding to issues that we had identified. I'm just curious, through your own assessment and observations of how the park's been used, are there other aspects of the park that you're going to be taking a look at and may need to address going forward?
Well, it's just open to the public. I haven't actually been there and seen it on a busy day of use, so I would have to take scrutinize it and observe it during a day of active use and see what the other possible misuses would be before I can speak to that. I think we caught two pretty quickly. It just opened 2 weeks ago, and already we see the plant beds are kind of vulnerable, and these armrests can create a hazard. So that's two right off the bat. I'm not sure what else at this point. I'd have to see it in use. And I'm happy to go down there. I live not too far away.
Great. Thank you. And thank you for the spaces, big assets for the community.
Yeah, I'll tell you that the spaces are really heavily used on dates. And if you really want to see a big crowd, go when that school lets out, which is around 2:33. I don't know. I guess the parents come with the skateboards and everything else because kids are using them and they're flying around, and it's great. No, it's been used, so it's a godsend. But on the other hand, yes, we need to address a couple of issues.
If I could speak very quickly about the quality of the landscape architectural consultant, Quinnell Rothschild Partners, and the contractor, JCC Construction. We got this done in a year, despite the pandemic. And they did not just good work, they did it quickly, expeditiously, and I believe they did a high quality job. So I wanted to give a shout out to them. And the design consultant was on the ball with everything. So we bring this to their attention to come up with solutions for these problems that you have mentioned to us. but they will act quickly. And the borough office will act quickly to put up the range fence.
Kudos to you and them. Anyone else have any comments from the community board or the public that they want to discuss? If not, I don't see anyone. No, everyone whose hand was up was called on. Okay, thank you both for being here. And yeah, if you could just keep us posted on when you're scheduling any follow-up work on that would be appreciated.
Will do.
Thanks again. Have a good evening. Okay. Item number 3 is really just an update. I have a couple of updates that I wanted to give. So let's start with item 3 on our agenda, which is Plus Pool. As probably a lot of you recall, this was a proposal that some people on the community board have really taken to, and there was enthusiasm about possibly locating it again in the East River, not far from the seaport or near the Brooklyn Bridge. And I know the community board recommended such to EDC, and we've been trying to get a response from them as to what's going on. They did put out an RFP. We asked them to include this area in the RFP. They declined. So the only areas that they seem to be considering for the Plus Pool is up in Board 3. We did invite EDC to be here, but they declined. So let me just read to you quickly the reason that they gave us for putting the park up there. We're focused on how we might ensure equitably distributed program along East River Waterfront Esplanade. Notably, after the building codes changed following Hurricane Sandy to ensure safe construction in the flood zones, the pavilion type buildings constructed in the seaport area are nearly impossible to construct today in a way that is 1, cost efficient, 2, complies with flood regulations, and 3, fits beneath the FDR. Not sure about that. Okay, because of phasing of the Esplanade construction, sections north of the bridge in the Two Bridges area don't have any restrooms, concessions, or other sort of activation that provides eyes on the street and other benefits. Recognizing that the pool facility would be a big boost to community facilities, we are focusing our efforts in the CB3 area of the waterfront. That said, we are back to work on the project and hope to make it happen soon. So I guess the question is, do we want to respond? Do we want to make another push for this? I know Tammy looked at this and she was a little questioning of whether the question of not having potties or, public bathrooms is a good reason not to put it in Board 1. And I would just point out that didn't we just review a restaurant under the FDR Drive about a week or 2 ago, and that I think we'll have tables and other facilities in it. It doesn't seem to be a roadblock to building anything. And number 3, I would just say that there's continued community interest in what's going to replace the new market building and whether that could turn into something that could house bathrooms, etc. Anyway, that's the update. Do we have anyone who would like to speak to this issue?
So, hey, Paul, this is Wendy. One of the things that I really think we should stress is there's no public pool in Lower Manhattan in Community Board 1. And if I'm correct in terms of where they're talking about placing it, it's not too far from the Hamilton Fish Pool. Is that am I in the ballpark? I'm not sure I understand exactly where they're talking about putting it in Board 3. Is that near Hamilton?
Well, if they're referring to two bridges is where that very tall building went up just adjacent to the Manhattan Bridge. So that area is generally known as Two Bridges.
Okay, so it's just that, right when my kids were little, I would take them up to Hamilton Fish, which is an amazing pool, amazing public pool. But it is not easy to get to from Lower Manhattan. And I think if they're going to put it somewhere, I think we should respond and say, there are wonderful public pools in other areas of the city, but there's not. I mean, there's a tiny one in Soho. I'm trying to think where the other public pools are. And, I just think of the Hamilton Fish one is the one that comes to mind on the east side. But I think we should respond back and say,
Okay.
give us a chance, because we don't have a public swimming pool. I don't know. I mean, it sounds like it's not going to make a difference, but.
All right, well, we advocate for things that may not always apply, but I'm with you. And even beyond a pool, we've been asking for, recreation spaces on the east side of our district for the longest time, including in this Esplanade project. And they said, because of subsurface utilities and other issues, they couldn't do anything like that. We also have heard, everyone has heard the story about how Howard Hughes has promised to put open space for kids on the roof of Pier 17, which never came to be. So I think, and as you know, some members, this community board and Rosa on this committee is doing a lot of work on trying to activate some older spaces like the Brooklyn Bridge banks, et cetera. But meanwhile, we're just running into, no cooperation out of the city. So I don't think there's anything wrong with, again, going on record, reminding them that we could use some improvements here, just like, not that Board 3 shouldn't get their share, but I don't point to anything that we have here on the east side of Board 1.
Yeah. So, and just to make it a little broader, I think Plus Pool has always been interested in making this more than just a swimming pool for a certain times of the month. They're very interested in water quality and, the water itself. And they have amazing partnerships with every, Billion Oyster Project or in River Keepers, and they've done a wonderful job reaching out. So they also see themselves as educating the public about how to engage with the rivers that are around. So I think when we write the response, it's not just about the swimming pool. They could actually be the nonprofit that bridges the divide between, to talk about, what's happening on the water by people coming to that site and seeing, and engaging on it on no better way than actually swim in it part of the year than to see how water quality is and the water level. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. And I see Liz, you would like to comment?
Yes, Paul. And again, I just want to reiterate what you've said and everything that Wendy has said. And I think it's just really important for us to go on record and to keep repeating the same mantra. We need more active recreation space on the east side waterfront. So I absolutely think we need to comment on this. Thank you.
All right.
So I would just, hi, Paul, it's Richard. I would just
Okay.
ask if they're putting it in Community Board 3, that's a lower income area, and really, wouldn't we be arguing against providing an important amenity for a lower income demographic by doing this?
So does that mean we should never request anything for beneath?
No, not at all. Just in terms of if it's sounding like an either or, and we're arguing against that versus putting it here, that's what I'm questioning.
Well, I don't think we're saying not to put it there. I think we're saying they should give some consideration for putting it here, and there are very valid reasons for putting it in the Board 1 area. Okay.
Okay. Said my piece.
Tom, did you want to comment on this?
I think it's been covered very well. So I was going to say much along the lines of what's already been said. So I won't. I don't need to add more, except I support what's been said. And I do want to. I just got my phone died, so I had one more point to make on the last park issue. And I don't know if it was raised. If I could just tell you that when you drive along Front Street from Dover, and you end up, or Frankfurt, I guess it is, and you come towards the park, there's a very low granite step is the barrier, and it blends in with the cobblestone, and it's very hard to see. And I think we could have some cars hitting it, and it, at night, or an unfamiliar car with the neighborhood. And I just think it's a scary, dangerous situation, and that those granite blocks also are pointy and sharp cornered, and they should be beveled or rounded for safety. There's a lot of kids there, and it's just treacherous. I think that was what I had meant to say. So if that could be added whenever we
All right,
discuss it again.
maybe if you don't mind, send that into the office so they understand what you got. Unless Diana, you got that. Did you get that, or should he send you?
I got it. I think I got it. So I'll connect with I think Therese and Ricardo are not with us anymore, but I'll connect with them, Tom, to pass it along as well.
Thanks. Sorry
Okay.
about that.
No, that's okay. So let's see if we could wrap this item up. Are there any other speakers on it that haven't been heard or that want to keep going?
Paul?
Yes,
It's Andrew.
go ahead.
Just with respect to our messaging, I just wanted to clarify, given its proposed location, wouldn't someone argue that it is covering the Lower East Side of Manhattan? So I'm not sure the distinction we're making about positioning it on the east side of CB1 versus where it seems like they're positioning it, which is the southern eastern portion of CB3.
Well, I would just say that, again, as you've heard, I said it and other speakers have said it, and it's self-evident that our part of the waterfront, as opposed to Board 3, which actually has some waterfront properties that from parks and from other agencies that serve them. And again, I'm not here to say that they shouldn't get everything they're looking for. But on the other hand, our job is to advocate for Community Board 1, and I think we have a very valid ask to put it here, and I think there are good reasons to put it here.
And I'm not disputing any of those reasons. I'm just asking a question about the manner in which we message our need and our advocacy.
Well, you could make the same argument that, well, why can't the people from the east side just walk to the west side when they have park needs? Why don't they just, and they probably do, when I raised my kids, of course I took them to parks in Battery Park City, and now there's Hudson River Park and other spaces. But that's not a good reason to not try to create facilities for all neighborhoods.
Right.
I think, Andrew, were you trying to say that just north of the Brooklyn Bridge are public housing facilities right in the area of MAT and Chinatown? And even though it's technically outside of Community Board 1, it's certainly closer for people on the other side of the Brooklyn Bridge to walk to that area than to someone in, on the west side, to Paul's point.
I guess what I'm saying, and maybe it's just in how the message is actually constructed. We're during the last 5 minutes, we were talking about generally how the east side of Manhattan along the water is underserved, particularly the lower part of the east side. I think it makes, if that's the wording we're using, it makes it pretty easy for someone to come back and say, we are placing the pool where it is serving the east side, lower east side of the city.
Well, the counter argument could be that if you put it, physically in Board 1, that population north of the Brooklyn Bridge could come down and use it if it's in this area.
I completely agree. And again, maybe it's just in how the message is structured. Are we proposing a very specific location?
Wendy,
I think that makes it harder for someone to say.
we did, as some of you probably recall, we have gone on record on this already. So this is nothing new. We've already been advocating for this.
Yeah,
Who's
plus
that?
pool.
Go ahead, Wendy.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. I was going to say Plus Pool has said there's only a handful of sites that actually could have the pool because of the current. And I think that, I don't know exactly where it would be on the south side of the Brooklyn Bridge, but somewhere in that seaport area. I don't know specifically, but that's a good spot. Obviously, the spot that they're looking up a little bit further up the river. And then the very southern tip of Governor's Island is another spot. So, and the west side is actually completely, the Hudson River flows too fast, or it's not proper. Or I don't know what the issue is, but they can't put it in the Hudson River. So they've already done those studies as to what's the appropriate spot.
Yeah. So, and again, I'm advocating we go on record, but to the point you just made, Paul, we've been on record and we really haven't had much airtime. Of course, we can dust off our prior arguments and make them again, but it just seems pretty obvious it'll fall on deaf ears. I don't know if there's a different way to.
Well, I think one of the things.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I apologize, but Plus Pool wants to operate so that people can use it for free, but obviously it will cost a lot of money to run the bathrooms and the locker rooms and hire lifeguards and that type of thing. And so I think they were hoping to be tied into more of the seaport area to get, there'll be an engagement that, obviously a bigger developer could help them subsidize some of the costs. I don't know if that's true or not still, but I don't know, maybe there's another way to engage further up. I don't know, but it's obviously they're going to have to figure some revenue model out. So anyway, enough of that, but I think it's wonderful to advocate for our neighborhood, and to your point, Paul, it's not taking away from anybody else.
And yes, just to follow up, Plus Pool seemed to be very interested in putting it in sort of this area that we're discussing. And maybe they thought it would be more economically feasible to raise the funds and to put it there. Again, I don't recall all their rationale, but all right. So
I can just add that they already did a project and a sort of a starter project pro forma with the Seaport with Howard Hughes, and they had a ceremonial Plus Pool in there that was doing the filtering, and it was an educational project. It was I guess about not last year but the year before. So yes. I think you're right. They're clearly focused and thinking that they could come down here.
All right, so let me propose a motion that we again make an appeal to EDC to reconsider and give some rationale as to why their reasoning doesn't really make sense, that it could not be physically put down here for a variety of reasons, and to again state why we think it would be a good fit. So does anyone want to second that? Okay.
I'll second that, Rosa.
Okay.
Do we want to engage with the Plus Pool people and find out their thoughts as part of this?
Wendy, you were the one who was talking to them most often. Have you had any communications with them in all
You
this
know,
time.
I actually have to say I'm pleasantly surprised that it was that it came up, and I should have reached out today when I saw it on the agenda, but I have not reached out to them. But I can if you'd like.
All right. Yeah, I don't think that's a bad idea to see where they are on this from their perspective. All right, so the motion is before us. Anyone want to discuss it, or are we ready for a vote?
What is the motion exactly?
What is the motion to tell EDC that we don't really agree with their reasoning as to why Plus Pool couldn't be put down here, and because of the lack of facilities seems to be the major reason they're posing, and to respond there, and then to reiterate the reasoning as to why we think it would be a good fit down here because of the need for this neighborhood to have some recreation facilities, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, thanks.
Call the question.
Okay, Diana, you.
Yeah, I'm gonna just call for any opposed, abstaining, or recused. So are there any opposed? Any abstaining? Any recused? Okay, it's unanimous.
Okay, thank you. Let me just give a quick update on a couple of items and then we'll be out of here in a couple of minutes. Number one, as you see, the Brooklyn Bridge Banks and Dugout was postponed yet again. DOT is giving a runaround on that project. I don't quite understand why they are so hesitant to show up. Well, I sort of have some ideas, but in any event, we're going to try to get them here next month. Okay, so that's the update there. I did want to give a quick report on a very sad incident that took place along our waterfront that I'm sure many of you heard about, where I guess a homeless woman was killed, murdered in the old New Market building. That's one of the old Fulton Fish Market buildings that remains on the waterfront, just south of Pier 17. So this has been the subject of a lot of discussion in this committee and other forums. I know a lot of people in the community would have preferred that that building be restored into some kind of community facility. And I think the community board is on record for that. EDC has come back many times and said, no, we are not going to do that. We don't have the budget for that. The building is falling down. We really have to get rid of it. And they actually came to us in 2019 and said, okay, we're demolishing it. And obviously it's still there. And according to lots of reports that we've gotten from the police and from EDC, there have been a lot of homeless people that have been improperly, illegally, in that building. And I know the Quality of Life Committee is going to have a discussion, I think, on this issue at their meeting on Thursday and try to get a little more info from the NYPD. I mean, at this stage, I think it's really important that if they can't restore the building, and they obviously have done a very poor job of securing the building so that people are not living there improperly. And I should also point out that the population that's been in there have been people that are trouble, and they've been robbing businesses along Fulton Street, from what we understand. I know they're aggressive, sneaking into the buildings at Southbridge Towers, according to the director of security there. So it's been a big problem. Bottom line is now EDC is swearing to us that they are planning to demolish the building very, very soon. And again, I would just urge Tammy to write a letter speaking to this issue and our concerns, and that this is very sad that the city has mismanaged the situation, and they have to handle the thing and possible demolition, and B, deal with the homeless situation that's ongoing on Fulton Street, that the same population is apparently living under scaffolding near a lot less store. So that's my report there. And finally,
Hey, Paul,
yes.
I am here and I did hear you. And yes, I'm happy to do so.
Okay, thank you for that. And finally, I just want to make a quick announcement for the downtown boathouse. They've asked us to make everyone aware that they do plan to open for the season and plan to operate from Memorial Day till Columbus Day. And in fact, right now they're having some kind of Zoom event with other free human-powered boating programs in Lower Manhattan. Excuse me, they're all discussing their plans for the season. So that's ongoing. I guess if maybe you could put that in the chat area if anyone wants to see it, Diana. So that's the story there. Hopefully we'll have a chance to open fairly soon and people will start resuming somewhat normal activities now that things are improving a bit. Okay, that's all I have. Does anyone have anything else they wanted to raise or any other items, or are we ready to make a motion to adjourn?
Paul, I just would let everyone know that the Governor's Island rezoning vote is tomorrow at the City Planning Commission for those interested.
Yes.
If I could just speak as a business person, not as a member of the community board, to alert you to the fact that typically my business will restart in Battery Park at Slip 2 with a sub-license under the statute cruises, and the EDC determined through that they were closing all slips except for Slip 3 for all operations, and about a week or two ago, and so I don't have a place to go right now. So I'm reaching out to parks to explore any options for remediating or figuring out what I might do, but I don't have a place for my boat right now. So.
All right, sorry to hear that.
Hey,
Just
Tom,
Tom,
did you reach out to Brookfield for what's going on with the marina? The only reason why I ask is we put the board put an ask in actually to find out what the status is, and they said they would be reopening the marina for the summer. So yeah, maybe it's a good time if you, not ideal, I know, but if it can get you in the water.
Well, the Clipper City doesn't fit into North Cove. The Shearwater can go in there, but they're resuming regular rents, and I don't know that I can handle it with the demand I don't know that I have. So I don't know if I'm gonna be operating this year yet. I'm still trying to figure that out.
Okay. I guess I don't see anyone else trying to make any final comments. So with that, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you all for being here, and I guess we'll see you next week at the full board meeting. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you all, and thank you, Diana.
Thanks, everyone.